Torture, sexual violence, gas chambers, deadly medical examination, and much more mark the history of female spies captured by the Nazis that will leave you shocked and horrified. In this video, we will uncover the cruelties and horrors faced by female spies who were unlucky enough to get caught by Nazis. So stay with us and discover the unspeakable atrocities that prisoners of war had to face. But before that, do like and subscribe to the channel. The Nazi regime was about 12 years, but these 12 years hold the most terrifying stories in the history of the world. The worst part of them was capturing the opponents of Nazis or anyone defying the law and threatening them as Nazis pleased. The world knows about concentration camps and the brutality that followed. History is full of heroic names, but even sadder endings are recorded next. The era of the Nazi regime also highlights the rise of the Polish secret state, French resistance, and SOE, the Special Operations Executive. Many of the people working in these organizations were captured, interrogated, tortured, and imprisoned. Many of them were women, some known and some unknown. Some decided to speak up against the barbarism, but some did not speak about the war and the atrocities that happened to them due to different fears. However, many names were uncovered and several stories were told and published. Among them include the names Noor Inayat Khan as Madeline, Violette Szabo, Odette Sansom as Lise, Helena Podliaski, Christina Sis, and many, many more. Everybody knows the name Noor Inayat Khan, who was an undercover wireless operator in Nazi-occupied France. Descendant of Indian royalty, she became a part of the French section of Britain's Special Operations Executive, whose purpose was to infiltrate German-occupied territory and set Europe ablaze. She was one of the last operators transmitting to London from Paris when she was betrayed by a French collaborator and arrested by the Gestapo on October 13, 1943. Then, later, she was taken to the Pforzheim prison in Germany, where she was kept chained in complete isolation for 10 months, which was supposed to break her spirits. She was interrogated brutally, she was physically beaten and mentally tortured, but remained steadfast and resilient. Her captors wanted her to reveal the codes to send false messages back to London, but she refused, consistently infuriating her captors. Later, in September 1944, she was sent to the Dachau concentration camp, along with 3 other female SOE agents, Yolande Beekman, Madeleine Damament, and Elaine Pluman. At Dachau, Noor was severely beaten and then shot at the back of her head by an SS officer, which marked her end. Her last words were, "Liberty." A similar story happened a few months prior in 1943. The month of April brought the news of the arrest of Odette Hallows, an agent for the United Kingdom's clandestine Special Operations Executive in France. She was betrayed by a double agent, Colonel Henri, who was a German officer and claimed to wish to work for the Allies. Despite Odette's suspicions, his involvement led to her arrest, and she was taken to the Fresnes prison in Paris. Though she miraculously survived the torture, while the interrogation would leave a lasting impact on her mental and physical health, she was beaten severely, and several times her back was burned by a hot iron rod in an effort to make her talk. The Gestapo also threatened to pull out her toenails, but the horrific treatment never broke her spirit, and she did not reveal any vital information. However, Szabo was the SOE agent who was captured by the Nazis in a fierce gun battle. Szabo had taken part in reconnaissance missions and helped organize sabotage activities against German forces. During her second mission, she was captured and taken to the first women's concentration camp, the Ravensbrück concentration camp. There, enduring interrogation and torture, she was later shot in the head, and her body was cremated. Nancy Wake's name was widely known. Known as the White Mouse, she worked for the French resistance and coordinated guerrilla warfare against the Nazis. She was one of the few who escaped capture several times, although the Gestapo placed a massive bounty on her head. Despite the dangers, she continued to work for the Nazis, and so did Virginia Hall, or the Limping Lady, who was one of the most effective Allied spies in Nazi-occupied France. Her will and strength are shown in her efforts. and despite having a prosthetic leg, she worked for SOE and later OSS. The Gestapo considered her one of the most dangerous Allied agents, and she evaded capture multiple times. However, those who were captured and later survived the tortures lived to tell horrendous tales, and unspeakable atrocities afflicted them. One of them was Helene Podlaski, who was a member of the French resistance, and narrated her story in her late life. She was one of those captured and sent to Ravensbrück, and later escaped with 8 other women. 2 of them were Jews, but were able to hide that identity. Otherwise, more harsh behavior would be destined for them. They were given the red triangle instead of the yellow one, which meant more danger. One of them, Zaza, was able to write a complete account of atrocities and escape, but it was published 60 years later. In her writings, she bitterly talked about the French prisoners of war and how local Germans assumed that they were voluntary prostitutes who had seen an opportunity to service the SS and the free workers in the camps. Here, we are talking about these young girls working for the SOE, who were beautiful and in their 20s. Christina Sis was, however, just 17 when the Gestapo arrested her for suspicious activities. She was actually a part of the Polish underground, working as a lookout and communications officer. The Nazis had invaded her hometown, Lublin, Poland, in September 1939, and she was arrested later in 1941. She was interrogated and tortured brutally for half a year before being deported to Ravensbrück. There, she dealt with medical experimentation with a group of 74 young Poles at the suggestion of Heinrich Himmler's personal doctor, Karl Gebhardt. You would not believe it, but they were subjected to gashes on their legs with shards of wood and glass. The SS doctors who began their inhumane experiments in 1942 introduced bacteria into their open wounds with the purpose of testing prototypes of anti-infection medication. This was when they decided to leak this information to their families, so action against these tortures might take place. Sis and 3 other girls sent a total of 27 letters, each of which contained secret information written in urine that can be read when exposed to heat. Their families correctly deciphered the messages, and later these letters were used by the families to hold cases against the doctor, the guards, and the wardens. It was reported later in a Jewish newspaper that after the war ended, Gebhardt was hanged as a result of the Nuremberg doctor's trial. Additionally, 11 guards and wardens from Ravensbrück, all female, were sentenced to death for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Their conviction was based in part on the evidence of the secret letters. The stories follow, but the common tortures faced by female spies included severe beating, often by fists, batons, or other blunt objects. Guards and oppressors preferred the prisoners to be kicked around or beaten by a stick, rather than touching them due to fear of infection, and posed themselves as authoritative. But more commonly, electrical shocks were given to sensitive parts of the body to make them speak up or give secrets. Sexual violence was also used as a means of physical torture and psychological humiliation. Although sleep deprivation, starvation, thirst, water torture, drowning sensations, and stress positions might be thought of as easier punishments, these intolerable punishments were used to break the spirit and weaken it. The psychological tortures, threats, and manipulative tactics were used as unbearable tortures. Of the 41 women recruited into the SOE, just under half did not survive the war, while many were left with harsh, haunting memories. Thus, the captures of war questioned their own fate and lay in constant fear and oppression. Some were able to escape, and some were released later with scary memories and social unacceptance. The horrors did not stop even after they got free from the Nazis' hold. What are your thoughts regarding the subject? Let us know in the comments section below. Stay tuned for more interesting videos.